Okay, I'd like to call to order the Town of Niskayuna Conservation Advisory Council meeting. This is the July 8th, 2024 meeting. Laura, could you please call the roll?
So in the room, we have Alan Daviero, Ashok Ramasubramanian, Chuck Petrowski, Simran Uturkar, and then online, we have Richard Frontero, Vicky Michaela, and Chelsea Ratner, Chairman Strayer, and the full planning department tonight. Laura Robertson, Clark Henry, and Trish Bergami is in the back.
Great, thanks. We have minutes, June 5th, 2024 minutes. Did anybody have any corrections they wanted to make to those minutes at all, or comments? Sure. Anybody online had any corrections they wanted to make?
No.
No.
Okay, then I will state that we should accept the minutes as written. Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay, privilege of the floor. Did you want to address us at all? Okay, sure. Okay, EAFs, we have no referrals at this time. Discussion items. Laura, you're going to give us some planning board updates?
Yeah, we don't actually have any planning board referrals tonight, but we will. We've got a couple minor subdivisions that just got submitted to the planning board. So at the next meeting, you'll probably be looking at my guess would be 2 minor subdivisions. And then the other just verbal update I want to give you is that GE is adjusting the position of the building that we approved, that we, did our recommendation to the planning board for. It was on the south side of the existing most southern building, and they're flipping it to like the north side. So I actually think it's less trees removed, and it doesn't really change our findings in any way, and they're still bound by everything that the planning board took a look at. But I just wanted to let you guys know, if you see it, it did shift on the site a little bit.
What was their motivation for that change?
So there were a couple of members on the tree council that said this, and I had mentioned to GE, but I don't know that they were really paying attention. Where they had it on the south side of the building, it was actually connecting to the back side of that laboratory building.
Right.
And like, this is like their sort of flagship building. And so as you were coming down, I think maybe they would have had to do some major changes to the back of the one building to make it look good. Whereas if they flip-flopped it, they're actually connecting it to, like, it's the north and they're connecting to the south of the other building. So now when you come in, it's front facing.
Okay. All right. Anything else, Laura?
Nope. It is going to the tree council for a reapproval of any changes in the tree removal and an updated landscaping plan.
Okay. All right. Climate smart community task force issues. Let's talk about the greenhouse gas emissions inventory. Jim, I believe you're online. I didn't know if you wanted to address the committee at all.
Yep. Thank you so much for inviting me. So, Laura, unless you have anything to introduce, I'm happy to give an update on the greenhouse gas inventory.
Oh, go ahead.
Fantastic. So, I think the last time I addressed this committee was a number of months ago. We were hired as the consultant to support the 3 tasks of the Climate Smart Communities grant from DEC, which the 3 are to develop a local government operations greenhouse gas inventory. That's what we're going to be discussing tonight. A community inventory that is sort of underway. And then finally, a local government operations climate action plan, which is going to kick off following the adoption or the submittal of the inventory that we're going to be talking about tonight. So I just wanted to give a heads up. We have a submittal deadline for Climate Smart Communities to receive points for the government operations inventory. We actually thought it was last week on Friday, and Laura and I were hustling the week before, and Laura did overtime work trying to get data into the various platforms that we needed to do this. And we got the inventory done, and fortunately, the submission deadline was extended 1 week by DEC to this coming Monday. So we can still make the deadline unless the committee here has additional comments or questions that would delay it. But our plan here is to review the results and receive any feedback that you have, and we can make some updates and modifications if needed. And again, if we do make the submission that's coming up, we're still going to be able to make modifications and additional stuff or additional data analysis and reports associated with it. So the inventory work doesn't end there, but we were trying to meet this deadline. So before I start, did everyone receive the inventory? I believe Laura put it in your packets.
Yes, we did.
It did. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and there's two things. So the greenhouse gas inventory is what you've seen as a report. There's a physical report in PDF format. We also have it in Word format. And then there's a compendium large calculation spreadsheet, which is the emissions model. And that also will be submitted. And that is also available to all of you who are interested in that. It shows all of the data and the calculations. Everything is very transparent. So you can sort of step through how the calculations are done to make sure you're comfortable with them, also for your own interest to see how these inventories are prepared. So both of those products are available, and I'll talk about both of them tonight. I'm going to talk about the report, and then if you're interested, I'll show you the emissions model just for those of you who want to, poke through it later on your own time. So let me go ahead and share. Let me just see. I'm not used to Google Meet. Let me make sure I'm doing this right. Try that. See if this works. Okay.
That's working.
It's working. Perfect. So anyone is welcome to interrupt and ask questions. I'm not monitoring chat in case anyone's doing that. Just kind of blurt in and it's totally fine. I'll just keep it informal. So again, we submitted for Laura and for your committee's review tonight and beyond the draft government operations greenhouse gas inventory. Let me see this here. Okay, I've got to manage it from here. Okay, so let me just give you an overview. The emissions of your government operations inventory is the greenhouse gas emissions associated with everything that your government is doing for your services. So it's all of your energy use, all of your, so electricity and natural gas, any fuel oil or propane. It's all of the fuels you use within your fleet. So that's gasoline and diesel, also electricity for your electric vehicles. All of those create greenhouse gas emissions. It also includes some other things as well. So such as operations of your wastewater treatment plant, there are some emissions associated with those operations, not just the energy use, but methane is created from the facility as well as some other gases. We'll talk about those. There's also emissions from things like your use of refrigerants and other chemicals. And those are becoming more important as we move to heat pumps. A lot of the heat pumps have refrigerants in them. So now we have to do a better accounting, because if we use refrigerants and heat pumps that leak, they can also create emissions. So we're trying to make sure we have a complete accounting of emissions from your operation. So the final roll-up number is 1,778 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. I know for many of you, that's just kind of an arcane number. So
Jim, you're not advancing on your share screen. I think it's, if you went to full screen, Google Meets doesn't recognize it. So you're gonna have to scroll through your unfull screen PDF.
okay, so I am in unfull screen. It's rolling forward. Does it roll forward?
No, it's not rolling forward for us.
So I am not in full screen, and I am, let me see here.
I can share it, and then as you're talking, I kind of know where you are. Or do you want
I can try, let me try sharing it. Is it sharing here now if I share it using the browser?
Oh, there you
Oh, there
go.
we go.
That's working
Yeah,
now.
much
Okay.
better.
Yeah, so I'm not using the app. I'm using the Microsoft browser to
yeah,
show
we're
it.
good now.
Okay, so this is fine.
Yeah.
Seems to work. Okay, so here we are, 1,778 tons. Now, if you read the report, I don't need to go through all of this stuff. There's some compliance issues about how the inventory is done. We present how it is compliant with the Climate Smart Communities requirement and all of the different protocol things, data sources that we use that are required by DEC's Climate Smart program. And we put these front and center to make it easy for their program to read it, as well as for you to read it and understand how these calculations are done. But there's a couple things. And again, I am now looking at the full screen. I can't see anyone's reaction. So if you do have questions, please just blurt out because I can't actually see anyone's face right now. But I wasn't sure. So for how to read a greenhouse gas inventory, I'm not sure. For those of you you're on the Climate Smart Committee, I don't know if you're experts in how you read these inventories. I'll just give you a quick primer. Many of you're already familiar with this, but the number that you're looking at, traditional carbon accounting, is in units of metric tons. You'll see this word MTCDE. This is metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. That is 1,000 kilograms. And it is a normalized accounting of all the different greenhouse gases into one single roll-up number. So for those of you who know carbon accounting, this is second nature to you. For those of you who aren't, each greenhouse gas, CO2, carbon dioxide is the most common, but you're also emitting others like methane from the wastewater treatment plant. Nitrous oxide is another one, and refrigerants are others. And each of those gases have something called a global warming potential, which compares them to carbon dioxide. So for example, methane has a 100-year global warming potential of 28. It is more potent than CO2. We don't emit as much of it, but if we have a ton of methane that comes from the wastewater treatment plant or from some other source, we multiply it by 28 to convert it into an equivalent amount of carbon dioxide. So this helps for carbon accounting. It makes it easier for climate action planning if you can report your emissions in a single number. And I do put in here, so for those of you who are interested, the CLCPA, the Climate Leadership, Community Leadership Climate Protection Act, did make some protocol changes or introduce the idea that there would be changes in the way New York counts carbon. It's not internationally standard yet, but the changes that they're looking for are to make some changes to the global warming potential of methane, which would actually significantly increase your inventory from your wastewater treatment plant. And then they also want to add life cycle emissions from some fossil fuels. These are not included in this inventory. We're aware of them. And the reason they're not is because the DEC's Climate Smart program doesn't require it yet. They ask you to do a protocol which has not yet adopted this. So there may be some changes in store depending on things. And this is kind of nerdy climate stuff, but if you're interested and you read this, I'm happy to talk to you about it without having to go into details here. So, but we did want to acknowledge it for this submission. So let's go ahead and talk about your numbers. So you could do your greenhouse gas breakdown in a number of different charts. So this report has some of them. The spreadsheet has more. And the climate action plan will be broken down into actions by these sectors as well. So of the 1,778 tons, your vehicle fleet, that means all of your on-road and off-road vehicles in your highway, water, sewer, police, and your administrative vehicles, not only their on-road things, but also any off-road equipment that they may be using anything that is using gasoline and diesel or electricity, gasoline and diesel from your tanks. These are your emissions. And this is the largest source, 763 tons. That's roughly, I didn't put the percentages in here, but it looks like it's about 40 to 43%. That's the majority. We also added your energy costs in here. These aren't required for greenhouse gas inventories, but they're very helpful for your climate plans because a lot of the actions that you're going to do often will save money in some way. So you're spending about $250,000, $250,000 per year on gasoline and diesel as of 2023. Obviously, prices go up and down. So it's not an insignificant expense, but it's an important one. And you're going to see that across all of your government operations, your energy bill is around $800,000 per year across electricity,
With-
gas.
Yeah, Within, I'm
yep.
sorry, a quick question, within the vehicle fleet, and
Yep.
feel free to let me know if we're going to cover this later, but is it, I know it was an inventory of the actual vehicles, and given the town's need to have a lot of service vehicles, large vehicles, plows, does the data skew to like a few very large vehicles that are very, consume a lot, or is it just our fleet in general is wasteful?
That's a very
wasteful?
good question. That analysis we have not completed yet. So we do have an inventory. We do have a list right now of all your vehicle types, but we haven't broken the emissions down into each of those vehicles yet. And the reason is we didn't need to do it for this inventory submission that we're kind of rushing to do
Understood. Thank you.
this week. But we do have your complete inventory, so we will be producing that data for you for your climate action plan. So, but yes, typically you're going to find a bunch of your large equipment, if you have plows and things, will be the majority of your emissions in diesel. We do have it broken down by department for this, so we have the difference between police and each of the different sectors. Let me just, while you're talking about it here, fleet operations. The granularity we have here is so far, you can see it right here, between gasoline, your police department is the second largest, and then the water sewer department is the largest. So we do have some breakdown, but you're going to get better granularity in the next round of data. Okay, so let's go back.
Jim,
Go ahead and ask questions again. I can't see anyone, so just blurt
Jim,
it out.
This is Ashok. I had a quick question. So in the first page, you had said, our big number, the total is about like 7,000 odd, right?
That's 1,778.
Yeah, 1,700. Sorry, and a very big picture. The town of Niskayuna is about like 15,000 square miles, and it has about 22,000 people. So given the scope of your work, you must have seen many towns and municipalities. Do you have a sense of how we compare against other similar towns and municipalities?
Yeah, so I did not include that. I will include this for some of the future reports that we do. But yes, you're correct. I do quite a lot of this work. I would say you're actually doing quite well for the size of your municipality. 1,778 isn't too bad. When I first started this work, I expected it to be over 2,000 based on your population and size. So, relative numbers, I expect when I do a more formal comparison, you will feel as though your operations aren't too bad. So I'll say that. There's nothing in here that's outrageous or appears to be bad. In fact, you've done quite a lot. You have solar panels at a number of your facilities. There's been a lot of work at the wastewater treatment plant that's been done. So I think those efforts are reflecting in your numbers.
Thank you.
And I think we'll help characterize that when we look at this further. Okay, great. Anyway, yeah, keep asking questions. So if you look at the order of importance, so obviously vehicle fleet, wastewater treatment still remains, and it's not uncommon, this usually is the biggest sector after fleet, is almost the same size. It's 635 tons. This is the wastewater treatment plant and all of the various pumping stations. It looks like you have roughly 20 utility accounts associated with pumping stations all throughout the town. So you're moving water around. It's very heavy. Water's very heavy. Costs a lot of energy and resources to move it and to treat it. So this is not a surprise. We are aware that there is, you won an award at the wastewater treatment plant for some net zero activities. I interviewed the operators there, and some of those activities are underway, including cogeneration. And I guess there are some issues with mixing some of the, within the digester, mixing some outside waste into it, and questions that DEC might have about that. So there's some issues that are still underway, and once resolved, may reduce these emissions even further. So, but it's not a surprise. It's typically the biggest one. After that, in the way this carbon accounting is done, administrative services is next. It's stepped down 3 times smaller. This is everything that is not water related. So the town hall, any of the parks, highway garage, office buildings, anything that is not water service related is this number. So again, this isn't too bad for the size of your operation, and your garage, highway garage and town hall together often are more than this in a community of your size. So this isn't too bad. But then moving down, the drinking water treatment plant, again, this is one facility. It's pretty much self-contained. It is that plant and any related pumping stations. We didn't have a lot of utility accounts associated with drinking water treatment. Mostly it was the accounts there. But that's 142 tons. And as you're going to see, it is the largest electricity consumer of all your individual facilities. And I think because you added the UV treatment there. So again, nothing here is standing out as bad. This is just the reality of emissions related to your operations. So, and any of the actions are going to be routine operations to make this more efficient, better, or innovative things to reduce this. And then finally, you're going to see here, the streetlights and traffic signals is very small. 20 is not large. This is actually very good. And so, and Laura, we didn't have a chance to connect on this because we were rushing here to try to meet the deadline before your vacation. But I assume that means all of your streetlights are LEDs or have been converted at some point to LEDs. Is that correct? I didn't actually ask when we were pulling this data.
So the streetlights that are owned and maintained by the town are LED, but the National Grid streetlights, they have a agreement with Schenectady County that as the older lights die, they're replacing them with LEDs, but I would say they're only like maybe a quarter of the way through replacement.
Okay, that's interesting. That's something we should follow up on because 20.24 suggests that they're all LEDs. So this is, now I'm going to make a note here in this review to make sure that number is correct. So we do have your inventory of streetlights, but you and I should check that to make sure National Grid, maybe they're charging you usage at an LED rate.
Oh, maybe.
So anyway, that's between us to figure out, but I would expect this number to be higher if it's still a lot of, 200 watt sodiums and 100 mercury vapor lamps out there.
Yeah, so there aren't a lot of streetlights in Niskayuna. I'm kind of looking at my board, and I actually am not sure that any of you have streetlights in your neighborhoods, but I do. And I know in my neighborhood, like of the 6 that are on my street, there's only one LED. If you have lighting, if you have streetlights, it's on your taxes because they're lighting districts, and individuals pay for their lightings.
Okay, well, we will verify that. Yeah, I don't remember the street lighting district being very big. So we'll go ahead and check that. So let's continue here. Oh, and I will say this, just one thing for you, which is of interest to a lot of communities, because there's a lot of discussion about buying streetlights. Sometimes communities are buying their streetlights. And often the reason is if you look at the charge of $60,000 compared to the emissions of 20, they're usually relative. You know, the next one here at 142 in the drinking water plant is only, double. And so it's because most of your charges for streetlights are the facility charges or the rental charges from the utility. Vast majority of costs are not the energy associated with them. So, which is one of the reasons some communities, particularly big ones, will seek to buy their streetlights just to save that money. I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I'm just pointing it out. That's why the bill is large. Okay, so let's go down. Rather than looking at your individual, your different sectors, I put in here the 8 largest emitting facilities. You have, I think, 15 or 17 in the spreadsheet. So there's smaller things like parks and things. I didn't include them in this report just because they're small and the numbers, there's just so many numbers to look at in a report. But if you're interested in them, you can go to the spreadsheet. But again, the wastewater, this is a typo I got to fix here before we submit. So wastewater treatment plant, 347 tons, by far the biggest. Now this one is using a lot of electricity, also uses a lot of natural gas, 4 times more than any other facility for the biosolids drying and the heating and other processes that are typical, again, with wastewater treatment plants. So this is not unusual, but this is where your expenditures fall.
Jim,
Yep.
please remind me, when we're calculating electricity into greenhouse gas emissions, how are we, do we know exactly what the fuel mix is for National Grid that we're using? Or is this an assumption that we're using, power source that is not, or, is it including hydro or a
Yes.
mix?
So that's a very good question. So the greenhouse gas protocol, which is used for this and is required by DEC, follows something called the Local Government Operations Protocol. And for that, it asks for emission factors to be that are, EPA has something called eGrid, which is an analysis of our nation's grid based on different ISO zones. So NISO has several zones. And upstate New York, which includes upstate National Grid, NICEAG, and others, have an emission factor in there, which is actually very clean. This emission factor here is about 250 pounds per megawatt hour, which is about 60 to 70% renewable. So your emission factor here is already pretty renewable in here. And I don't reference it specifically in this report, but if you go to the spreadsheet, you'll find a tab in there called emission factors, and it discusses exactly which one is used and what the source is.
Okay, so no, that's very helpful. Thank you. So it's, I don't mean to simplify, but it's basically a preset number established by an agency or resource, but it might not be completely reflective or accurate of the actual fuel source that we may be using.
Right. So,
Okay.
so the way emission baselines are done in New York in this program is we use an established agency adopted number for the baseline, but you can then adjust it. You can make adjustments like in your climate action plan. If you're doing things to procure cleaner power or generating renewables or doing other things, you can make adjustments in it. But they want everyone to start at a common number, so there's some comparability.
Okay.
So if you are able to get better power, and I know these facilities are already generating power, there's already solar there. So what happens there where you have grid connected solar is these consumption numbers are the net number. So this is the net amount of grid power that was consumed. So if you're connecting a renewable to a meter, it's usually on a net basis, not always, but it will sometimes run the meter backwards, but the amount in the inventory is only the net that's supplied from the grid. So if you had a renewable connected here that generated all your power, your consumption in the inventory would show zero. So there is different ways your renewables are connected to these inventories.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, great. So you can see here again that obviously the water treatment and wastewater treatment plant at 2.2 million kilowatt hours is vastly the largest consumer. The next one, Town Hall, at 297,000 kilowatt hours and about 9,000 therms isn't too bad. A $44,000 energy bill for your Town Hall, again, isn't too bad, but it's significant. And going down, actually the highway garage, and if I have this facility correct, I think we do, at 83 tons, and only $22,000 in energy bills. And this one here, I think I've got to make sure we put our propane bill in there now that I'm thinking about this, because that does not look high enough to me. I think it's going to be around 40. I think maybe that facility does use propane, correct?
Yeah.
Or I'm sorry to ask the questions. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it was highway and rec center.
Yeah, I may have to update this. This may be a little bit higher than this because I can tell by looking at it, it looks too low. But again, these numbers aren't unreasonable. You may end up doing, different activities at the highway garage. These are often heavy consumers, and usually near the top. Communities that don't have wastewater or water facilities, this is usually the highest one. Anyway, you can go down the list and see, rounding at the bottom, the senior center, and some of your other facilities. So For the climate action planning phase, generally what we're going to do is pull together a task force of those who operate these facilities, and we'll start convening a series of meetings to talk about the energy systems in them, the insulation systems, the treatment systems, work out in your capital improvement plans and your other plans to see what kinds of things you are going to implement or would like to implement, what kind of resources available, and then your plan will be documenting those ideas and will quantify the reduction benefits that you'll get. So, if you're starting at your operations now at 1,778 tons, you may want to try to get it down to 1,200 or some other number based on the conversations in this upcoming working group. And we'll demonstrate what your savings would be based on each of the things that you can think of. So, and many of you are doing things. Many of your facilities are already got a lot of plans to change up, put in heat pumps or better insulate or make changes. And so we'll try to capture those. Okay. Any other questions on this? I'll move down.
Yeah, Jim, one more question. This
Sure.
is Chuck
Yeah,
again.
please.
Sorry. And I think we have electricity and natural gas. From a carbon point of view, I mean, what is the ratio? Like electricity creates 1 unit, natural gas creates how many units?
Yeah, so you're talking about the conversion ratio. So electricity, it depends again on the question about what is the carbon intensity of the electricity
Right.
that's being used. So the electricity from the grid in upstate New York, as I mentioned, is relatively clean. So it's about 60 to 70% renewable or nuclear. So something that's emissions free. So 60 to 70% emissions free. That's pretty good. So natural gas is 100% fossil fuel. So if you convert from natural gas to electricity using upstate grid, you usually reduce your emissions by about 50%.
Okay, great.
So there's a significant improvement by just electrifying in upstate New York because the grid is clean. That's not the same if you do it in another part of the country where they're using gas and coal to generate electricity. The benefit of electrification is not nearly as compelling, but in upstate New York, it's quite compelling on its own. And you'll see that if you look at the emissions of the water treatment plant, 142 tons, it's using more electricity, but it's not using any gas. And the emissions here are not quite 3 times less, but about 2.5 times less.
Yeah, good
So the
point.
gas is where the emissions are coming from, more so here than in other parts. Does that answer the question?
It does. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You calculate these. If you are really interested, go to the spreadsheet. There's something called emission factors, and it shows you what the carbon in kilograms of CO2 per energy unit, which is MMBTU. So that is what you have to normalize the therms and kilowatt hours into a common unit. We use MMBTU to compare directly. So you can take a look at the emissions related to electricity versus gas or fuel oil or anything. All of that stuff is in there. For those of you who'd like to do it, I'm happy to have a call with any of you to go through it. Not that I'm sure you would love to do it, but I'm happy to help you understand it. Okay, any other questions on this? I could just round this off. Again, 7:35, we don't want to take forever. I'll just round this off with the other 2 charts that we have here. And this one is a breakdown of emissions by the energy use. So not thinking of your facilities, which one's the biggest. It's more so what kind of energy do you use? So again, that goes back to the question of electricity versus gas versus propane, et cetera, gasoline and diesel. So you can see here that electricity is actually the biggest producer of emissions. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the biggest producer per unit of energy. In fact, it's not. And if you look at the energy cost here, you're spending $471,000 in electricity. It's actually a little higher than that because we didn't put the supply charges in here. But for the emissions, if you look at natural gas, your bill is much less, $66,000. So you're not spending that much on natural gas, but your emissions are almost the same or close. So you can see, even though electricity is the highest one, it is smaller relative per unit of energy. And then if you go down, the fleet here is big, 421 tons for gasoline, so it's comparable to electricity, a little bit more than natural gas that you're using. And your diesel is a little bit less than that. You use more gasoline than diesel in your fleet overall. And you can look at the totals here. So this is where most of your emissions are. Now, I did add this, I'm going to highlight these here. There are some smaller sources. They're not as significant, but they're of interest anyway. So at your wastewater treatment plant, you're producing about 161 tons of emissions per year. That's equivalent to your town hall and your emissions in your highway garage. If I remember from the last chart, they were about 80 each. So the emissions from those are from your process. You're digesting your sludge. You're creating methane. You're burning most of it. You're flaring it. You're destroying it. But some of it is released. Some of it is escaped per protocol. And you also, your treatment process does something called nitrification, or actually, your effluent includes nitrogen, ammonia, and some other things, and those can create something called N2O, nitrous oxide. So your wastewater treatment plant creates some emissions. There are different ways to address it. It's not the major source, but again, if you compare 1,778 and 161, it's around 10%, 8%. So again, and I believe after speaking with the operators there, they are working on increasing the level of flaring and energy and usage of the methane there. So that this number will likely come down in the climate action plan. That's what I'm expecting. So, and then finally, just for fun, there is a bit of emissions from your refrigerants. They're not very big, but if you use your window units or central air AC or your mobile stuff, those are hydrofluorocarbons, generally HFC 410, and those are greenhouse gases. So if they leak from the units, they just create emissions. So they're not that high right now, but if we start moving toward heat pumps or an electrification kind of things, this may increase. So you'll probably be looking at putting into your climate plan, policy to make sure you're recycling it and protecting from leakages and things like that. In any sort of electrification roadmap.
Hey, Jim, I have a question
Yep.
about that. One of them is the federal law changing or reducing the amount of R-134 that's used in the refrigeration?
Yeah, I believe New York is phasing it out. So I think that's a New York law. So there is a timetable. I don't remember exactly what it is. 134 is phasing out. I don't know if 410 is out. So this will certainly make an impact. You may be able to eliminate if they can find suitable replacements for the smaller heat pumps. We'll see less of a footprint here.
Mm-hmm. And the second is sort of a related question. Given that the heat pumps use energy and there is this concern about refrigerant loss, do we have numbers for, like, if a typical person takes their gas or oil furnace out and replaces it with a heat pump? Is there rules of thumb and numbers that you could use to advertise the changeover?
Yep. You mean in terms of, are you thinking about cost savings or greenhouse gas savings or what?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
So rules of thumb for energy, for greenhouse gas savings on those?
Just the total metric tons. In other words, per BTU or per kilowatt.
Yeah.
Change it.
Yeah. So yes, there are definitely rules of thumb, and we'll include those in your climate action plan, but they are as follows. So a heat pump, if you're looking at, let's talk about an air source heat pump. There is a ground source heat pump option as well, but an air source heat pump typically it's taking energy from the air and moving it into your building. And so it's usually a ratio of around 3-to-1. So like if your building has a heating load demand of 4 units and you're using fossil fuel for that, you're burning 4 units of fossil fuel. If you put in a heat pump and you need 4 units of energy to heat the thing, a typical air source heat pump, they call coefficient of performance, is will pull roughly like 2 to 3 units of energy from the air and put it into the building. And then the makeup, the 1.5 units, is electricity. So your emissions would be, you're exchanging like 4 units of natural gas of heat for 2.5 units of emissions-free energy from the air, that's renewable, and about 1.5 units of energy of electricity that if you pull from the grid is relatively clean in New York. And if you pull the electricity from like a solar panel, then it's zero.
Yeah.
So-
That probably changes with the temperature. As the temperature drops, that ratio changes.
Yeah, so that ratio is an annual average. So there are, there are many different rules of thumb. So there's the actual coefficient of performance has very significantly, obviously, with temperature. Obviously, lower temperatures, when it gets really cold, isn't quite as good. There are peak levels. So these are, for our rules of thumb, we're talking about an annual average. So like for you, if you were looking at heat pumps for one of your buildings over here, let's bring up something like your, let's just guess town hall for some reason. You have 8,902 therms of natural gas. So let's just guess that that's used for your heating load. I don't know, you could be doing something else there. So you're using 8,900 therms of natural gas. Depending on the types of heat pump systems, you would be using roughly half of that amount of energy, just to be conservative, as electricity, in order to supply that amount of heating load to the building. So you would get a savings you would reduce this 8,900 therms of natural gas and replace it with about 50% equivalent of this amount of energy from electricity, which is going to be a lower footprint.
Mm-hmm.
Something like that. There's different ways and different types of heat pumps in different ways. It's generally advantageous in New York to do it, but there are also a number of different contravening reasons why you can't use heat pumps for different reasons in buildings. So it's not just the insulation could not be good, the heating conveyance, and there's many other reasons. You have to look at it building by building. I don't know. Is that too long? Hopefully, I'm answering.
That's good. That's good to know. So something like that would show up in a action plan, potentially.
That's correct. So if, for example, you will look at any of these facilities, obviously the process treatments at the wastewater treatment plants are not going to be heat pump related. They may have other things they're doing to reduce the emissions, but your facilities like your town hall garage, water sewage garage, senior center, you're going to be looking at lighting and heating systems and insulation. And you may have in a roadmap, you may want to move portions of these buildings to heat pumps. You may move them all. And there's different scenarios. And those scenarios will translate into reductions of these, of emissions from gas, increases from electricity, and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that'll be discussed in the plan and through this committee, so everyone can kind of talk through it and see how it's shaping up. Okay, any other questions? I think we're about done with this. I think I went through everything here, and we already talked about the breakdown by your department. So I think we can end here. I've gone on quite a long time. I do have a spreadsheet. I'm happy to show it, but we can, you can, Laura, anyone can contact me separately if they want to have a discussion on that. We don't need to spend this time here going through that, I don't think. Unless you want to see it, then that's up to you. Otherwise, I think we can conclude here, and let me know if you have any more questions before
Does
you
anybody
move on.
on the committee have any additional questions? Okay, sure.
Jim, one final question, please. The town recently has started doing some initiatives that are aimed at preserving biodiversity. And one change has been that we don't mow as much of the grass as we used to do, particularly in the Blatnick Park area and in a couple of other sites as well. And I believe the acreage of the land that's not being mowed is known, would it be possible, given that, to calculate the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions as well as the fuel savings for our town?
Yeah, it would be quite straightforward to do it. We do that all the time for projects submitted by communities to NYSERDA's grant programs that are asking for funds for this. So, yeah, we could easily estimate based on the equipment that you're not using to mow and the acreage and the fuel consumption rates of that equipment. And it's gasoline likely, or could be diesel depending on the equipment that's being used from your tanks here that's showing up right now. Yeah, so we could show an estimated reduction for you on that. No problem.
And
Then we'll include that in your climate action plan.
yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Anybody online have questions for Jim?
I think you did a pretty good job explaining everything.
Well, that's good to hear.
I have a question about the methane calculation. What was the reason you decided to go with the 100-year global warming potential as opposed to the 20-year, which is recommended by the CLCPA?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, and we can change that. It's really up to you as stakeholders to make a decision on that. This is an interesting question. I know the DEC staff quite well, and worked with them for a long time, and so the rules that they have written for their program are that the inventory should be compliant with LGOP, which is called the Local Government Operations Protocol, which still discusses the international standard of 100-year global warming potential. So they're haven't decided if they want to enforce the rule of 20-year global warming potentials or not. And so some communities are using them and some communities are not. So we really can make the change here if you would like to. What it will do is increase the methane from your wastewater treatment plant by a factor of 2 to 3. So it would go up from 120 to about 300 to 400. It'd be a more significant component. And I think we did do an analysis in here. I'm sorry, let me show you this. Since you did ask about this, we did an analysis on what the difference would be already. And it's in here. Let me see if I put it in here. Okay, yeah. So if you read this, the update would change your emissions from 1778 to roughly 2350, we think, which would include the increases from methane, and we would be adding life cycle emissions. And we would probably use New York issued a couple of emission factors for that, which would add a footprint to your fuel oil and propane and natural gas usage. So long story short, it's not, the Climate Smart program hasn't adopted it as official policy yet. It's not in their guidance. And they haven't given clear instructions on this one.
Yeah,
Thank
Jim,
you. I know there's different schools of thought on that. Definitely, it's not that everyone agrees, but I know a lot of environmental groups have come out in favor of the 20-year as opposed to the 100-year, especially because considering the potency of the methane. I had one other quick question. When you say upstate New York, what do you mean geographically?
So yeah, upstate New York means anything essentially north of Westchester County.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say upstate New York, we're talking only about the emission factor, the grid carbon intensity of the grid as reported by EPA's eGrid program. So north of Westchester County.
Yeah, because I thought that as you get closer to Canada, it's much cleaner because of the hydro coming from Canada, hydroelectric.
Yeah. So the way these emission factors are calculated is over the whole upstate area. It factors in the imports of renewables from hydro, the generation inside the region from nuclear and fossil and whatever, and creates an average factor for it. And the idea of the grid is, the way that the ISO operators operate is that the EPA believes there's enough interoperability in the upstate region to justify kind of an average mix, whereas downstate and Long Island and Westchester, New York City have a more of a constrained transmission system, so they rely on more locally dirtier plants. So there's a number of different ways of that these emission factors can be calculated, but this is the standard that's being used right now. So I wish it was more clear. Emission factors are always a problem. Everyone has questions, and they make a big impact. And so what's important for an emission inventory is that you understand them and then adopt one that's consistent. So you can make sure your local changes are what you're kind of targeting, and not, you're not looking at emissions going up and down because some, random emission factor calculation has changed on you.
Right, because things are always in flux, right? Hopefully there's more and more renewables coming online all the time.
Yeah, and hopefully then, I mean, the emission factor that's being used for the upstate region, which is north of Westchester County, is around 250 pounds per megawatt hour. It's very clean. And 10 years ago, it was around 700 or 800. So the emissions, the inventories in this area and anything upstate New York have been going down significantly over the last decade because the grid is getting cleaner due to our renewable portfolio standard. And it shows the emissions, the inventories are going down. If you've done one previously, you'll see it will have gone down.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So that question about the 20-year lifetime and the CLCPA, that is something that is in the air. So this is where I'm agnostic on it. We're a consultant, so I'm happy to have more conversations with this committee about that policy change, and you can also help. You can make a decision for the town on which one you want to use. DEC will accept either. I'm quite certain of that.
Well, Jim and I talked about it, and I'm actually the one that directed him to use the lesser one because it's more standard, and I'm just trying to, like, to Ashok's question, kind of see where we stand. And I think if we go to the other one, it'll be like harder to compare because our methane emissions are going to be calculated so much higher. And the other thing that Jim explained to me is that by making the methane emission so much higher, it doesn't affect Niskayuna in this way, but it may negatively impact a lot of rural area communities with farmland. And so I think they're still trying to figure that out. That's what he's saying. So I don't see the advantage of using something that may be still adjusted before it becomes the full standard because of the impact it has onto rural communities. And as far as like equity goes and stuff like that, we just have to be a little careful.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't mention, I think that the biggest controversy with this change is the agricultural community, which has a significant footprint from methane related to livestock. And those are going way up, would go way up. So I think that's where probably, if I had to guess, where the resistance would come from this. So again, we're gonna just follow where the state goes on it, but it is an outstanding thing.
Okay, any other questions for Jim? Jim, thank you very much. This was very informative and comprehensive. I appreciate your time explaining this report to us.
Great, thank you so much. So I will, if there's no more questions, I'll step off, and Laura will follow up on if you want to make the submission for
Yes.
next week.
Yeah, if you just want to touch base with me tomorrow morning on it, I think the submission date's Friday, but I think
Oh.
we can totally get it now.
Perfect, wonderful. All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank
You have a
you.
Thank
pleasant
you
evening.
again.
Thanks, Jim.
Okay, let's move to the second task force item. This is the natural resource inventory, and I see that we've included a interim report. Shook, if you wanted to go through it. We can go through it.
Okay, so very briefly, these are the reports from the natural resources inventory. We are currently in phase 2, and this is a grant obtained through the DEC. And for phase 2, we are surveying some 9 or 10 different properties. We just heard from a consultant for the GHG project. So the natural resources inventory NRI project also has a consultant, curiously also named Jim. So he is making 3 visits to Niskayuna. And the first visit happened in May 25th. So we are briefly, broadly thinking one visit in the spring, May 25th, which already happened. One visit in the summer, August 17th. We have scheduled that. And then one as yet unscheduled visit in the fall. So in our May visit, the spring, we inventoried the River Road Park and some wild space near Maple Lane. And I went to parts of the town that I did not know existed. And it was beautiful with a lot of biodiversity. And so I'll take a step back here. Like one thing that differentiates our natural resources inventory from the overall process is that community engagement is a big part of our procedure. So this event, we had a lot of Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts, as well as other community members attend our naturalist-led hikes. We simply walk around and look at the town's existing natural resources. And we have some preliminary reports with some exciting recommendations. Those are attached for your review. Laura, you want to add anything on that?
No, just quickly on this River Road Park one, the River Road Park had kind of a red maple swamp and then some upland, almost old growth hemlock habitats, both really great. And one of the advantages to the natural resource inventory is that it's looking at that habitat and also what's adjacent. So adjacent to the habitat that we were able to inventory is a working farm, which they mentioned has a lot of potential for interacting with, with the adjacent habitats. And then obviously the school has a lot of properties there that if you look at the way the trails work and everything, kind of leverages the existing space that we have. So River Road Park, I think, had some really nice intact forests. Oh, he's got, in one of the maps here, he's got the different communities there. So the red hatched marks are like the red maple, and then the green trees are like the hemlock forest there. Very, very nice. So he's got a lot of different recommendations in here that are really good. Maple Avenue has a real nice forest, but when you get down to the Leisha it's like the Leisha smaller, and it has a lot of like headwatery type of marsh habitat, and so a lot of sedges. Like our biologist got really excited about the sedges. There's a lot of them, and some of them that I'd never seen before. And then obviously like Mayflower, some Mayapple there, super cool. But another thing that we found is that like there's a real opportunity. I mean, it looked like the Adirondacks to put like some kind of a viewing area here, because I mean that picture doesn't do it justice. It's just very cool. That's like the headwaters of the Leisha, which is this little area over here. You can kind of see it.
Yeah, I had double take when I saw that picture, and I was wondering if Jim had slipped the picture from another area.
No, it looks
into
just
that.
like the Adirondacks. Like it's crazy
Yeah,
when you're in there
it
and
does,
you
yeah.
can't see a house. Like it's really, really cool.
And
So
that's
this
looking
is-
into Albany County, right? Right.
Yeah, and the other thing that he noticed, which he's got in here, these things that you don't really realize until you dive into them, is we walked in this area up here inside the town of Niskayuna, but down here it connects into a 74-acre undeveloped parcel in Colony. So one of the things that would be really interesting is if we could reach out to the town of Colony and do some kind of partnership here. I mean, you're taking, probably like 10 acres of open space in Niskayuna, and you combine it with 74 and you create something, really, really awesome. So those are the types of things that we were looking at when we were in there. It's very exciting. He's got one more report that he's working on for Lions Park, but I think it's such a big section that we may do another site visit before he finishes that one. But yeah, it was great. It was great.
What I think is really great is the maps of the surrounding area and of all the vegetation and stuff. I think this is going to be a really great tool that's going to help the town.
Yeah.
This is great.
And
we
I,
could have Jim go back at some point and do the same for the first phase one. I think that would be really good. I know we're limited in budget, but that would be also very useful as well.
and one of the things we always talk about is connecting down to the Pine Bush, both at the Stanford Park and using the kind of open space that we were peeking at, not walking on, but we did peek at it. You know, and then just kind of following that natural open space is actually, yeah, again, the headwaters of the Lyshakill. Some of you might notice when you cross the Lyshakill on Route 5, but it does keep going, and all the way down to the bottom of here is the Pine Bush. So with the exception of crossing Route 5, which Jim and I kind of laughed about the other day.
Is that an actual trail or is that?
No,
Wish?
But you know, I wish
Yeah,
Georgia
that's-
was on because it could easily be a corridor. At some point, you could create
Mhm.
these interconnected wild spaces where you could walk for miles,
Yeah.
and miles. I think he actually has the total miles in here. It's a lot.
Laura, do you think we can like actually start the process of reaching out to the town of Colony? If there's a contact information, I'm happy to follow, like send an initial email.
Yeah, or I know, like maybe, you know, because again, they don't always like, because it's a privately owned parcel in the town of Colony, but maybe, you know, how the Mohawk River watersheds people, they operate more in Albany.
Okay.
Like maybe it's their wheelhouse too, or maybe they even have talked to these guys before. So the owner is written right on there. It might be a couple different ways to look and see, but just surveying the ones we have and then trying to attach as many of the adjacent areas to them, you know, protects them and makes them.
Yep, that's good. Okay, so our next consultant visit is scheduled for Saturday, August 17th. And we will be walking through, again, 3 properties, wild spaces. Fieldstone Park is one. And I know we replaced Imperial Forest, but Laura, what did we replace it with?
We replaced it with, it's called, well, it's the area that's directly adjacent to the Rice Sanctuary there.
Okay.
The road that goes kind of Hummingbird Manor. Brendan?
Brendan Lane.
Yes.
Brendan Lane, yes.
So that area in between the houses?
Yeah.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that it's not so hot, so we can park on Brendan Lane and then do a little inventory. And if people wanted to keep going because the forest is nice, they could go into the Rice Sanctuary because there's actually a trail that connects the two of
That's,
them.
I was going to bring that
Yeah,
up.
there is.
That there's
Yeah.
actually a right of way there, although you'd never know it if you went down the road because it's grassed over.
Okay.
As you'll see with Fieldstone as well, when you go in there, it looks like you're trespassing,
Okay.
but you're not.
But you're not.
Yes.
So we actually decided we were going to park in the parking lot at Fieldstone and we're going to walk so that the cars aren't all close to people's houses.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the things that that we did last time that was immensely helpful was we had a flyer where people could click on a link and it would take them directly to the Google Maps and they'll know exactly where to come. So it's 3 different sites. The first one starts at 9 o'clock. The second one starts at 11 o'clock. The third one starts at 2 o'clock. So and as always, we'll be reaching out to the Boy Scouts. And this time, hopefully, I will reach out to the Girl Scouts early enough so that like we can get their participation as well. Oh, that reminds me, I need to email the Girl Scouts coordinators.
Jess and MJ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it for the NRI updates, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Ellen, can you talk in the mic? Yeah. You're always the quietest.
So I have the Fieldstone Forest is at 9, and then Brendan Lane is 11. What was the third one? It
Yes,
hasn't been decided yet.
it
That's okay, I
has
just-
been decided. Well, I forgot to bring my computer.
No,
so-
it's here. I can bring it up. I'll show you guys.
It's
Hold
not
on.
important. I was just curious. I was just writing my notes. That's all.
No,
So-
it's actually in your packet. So the
Oh, okay. I'm
third
sorry.
one-
I can look.
Well, Brendan Lane is in your packet, and Avon Crest North.
A1 crest, yes.
So
I
that's
didn't see
like,
that.
that's like Park at Shannon Boulevard. Check out that new area, like Overlook Park area. The Boy Scout guy said that it might be really hard to hike into the south side of the Leishkill, but we might be able to. And then the other area, there's quite a bit of open space wilderness area over here. Well, it's not wilderness, but open space area over here.
So this, this sort of thing really highlights how much hidden treasure and awesomeness is present in our town, and some of it you don't really understand until you go in and see what's there, and it's like so much importance for people having exposure to nature, wildlife corridors, and the NRI project is really beneficial in that aspect. I'll also quickly mention that me and Dot also sit on the comprehensive planning committee, and I was able to do an analysis of comments from the survey that we sent out to the residents, and green space and its preservation are pretty important for town residents right now.
Ashok, a side note, can you bring that to the Tuesday meeting?
Yeah.
Thank you. Oh, you're the best.
Here we go.
Very nice.
I think this is actually really good. Could we bring this report to the comp plan committee as well?
Yeah, the most recent walk for this round of the grant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
Because I think it would aid in the discussion.
I actually think we should bring both of them. The
Yeah.
greenhouse gas one is also, I think, important to set some targets for greenhouse gas emission reductions in the comprehensive plan.
So those refrigerants that on the 134, it has to be out of vehicles by January of 2028, and then out of like aerosols, it's past, the date's passed.
Oh, okay, good, thanks. I knew that they had passed something, but I wasn't sure exactly when the date was. That was a good report, Ashok, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Let's go to the initiatives. The first one, number 3, is the land preservation tools, and I did get your phone call.
Yes,
And what I am proposing that we do is look at this at the comp plan meeting,
okay.
put that on the agenda, and then what we'll do is we'll bring it back to this committee after we've consolidated.
Okay. And at some point, we should make a recommendation to the town board.
Yeah, no, we can definitely do that. I'm just trying to save my time and not do it twice. I hope you can accommodate me.
Fair enough, Chairman.
Okay. Pesticide outreach? Do we have
So
any?
nothing really new. I just was going, it's ongoing. I have, I actually have on my thing to sign up for farmers markets.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll go back to the farmers markets. So
I don't know where they come from. I can never predict it, but I mean, every once in a while, like once every, 3 weeks, someone will just walk into our office and buy a pesticide-free lawn sign too.
well, that's good. I mean, it's important.
So there was an article in the Times about a individual that has been working for a very long time with different seed mixes.
Mhm.
And apparently they have come up with a seed mix that requires very little water and very little pesticide. And they worked with it, and it's just a fix of different green stuff. I will try to find the article and send it out to
Yeah, that would be
the committee
great.
because I thought it was pesticide-free. He does not want to use pesticides at all or fertilizers, and he has worked for about 30 years to get
Great.
this mix.
Ellen Trish says we can't hear you. You know what you should do is probably put it on the other side of your computer because you bring it forward and then you turn to look at it. There we go. Now we'll hear you. Well, it's hard for them when they're doing the minutes and they can't hear what is said.
I wanted to say something quickly on the pesticide issue. So I'm a member of SCIAC, Schenectady County Environmental Advisory Council, and the county recently passed a binding resolution reducing dramatically the use of pesticides in county-owned properties. And SCIAC is trying to organize a kind of information session for the actual grounds people who do the work in the county, and explain to them alternatives and why we are doing this and so on. And that meeting, when it happens, I'm hoping we can get some data from that. We meaning SCIAC, and then try to have a similar meeting for Niskayuna homeowners someplace. Ellen, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, moving on, LOMO, biodiversity initiatives.
Oh, I meant to go out to the Blinding Park and see how the plantings
Oh.
look. Have you done that yet? Okay, we'll do more updates on that one.
Okay,
next time.
well,
So
Bring
I
pictures.
did, the only thing that, so the two things that I tried to do was I put together, or I wrote a letter and I sent it to Lauren and Clark today. Just, it's about the, for LOMO and for composting initiative and trying to work with our businesses. So now that the composting is open on the senior center, I'm hoping that we can include apartment complexes and other businesses in both LOMO and in composting.
I think it would be good when we're doing that too, to get like a general quote from Jim on the cost savings for the mowing when we're doing that, like when we're talking to him.
Okay.
Yeah. Because it might just depend on your audience. Some people want to do it for the sake of the pollinators, and some people want to do it for the sake of saving $200 a year. And
Yeah.
you might as well reach out to both of them.
I agree. You never know.
Yeah, and as far as the, I also spoke to Scrap 360 on what they have done with other apartment complexes for composting
Okay.
and how they go about doing that so that it's something, so they can reduce their garbage that they send to the landfill, which in return extends the life of the landfill.
Yeah, but if we're reaching out to them about composting and LOMO, like we would theoretically be maybe looking at some of the apartment areas. Like I'm thinking Iroquois Village, like on the left side of their multi-use path. I mean, it's just a mowed area. Nobody walks there. I mean, it even goes low. So I wonder if there's some, advantages if we're going there and talking to them, or if we might overwhelm them.
Yeah. So I was hoping to do for sure composting at the apartment complexes. That was my main thought. And then LOMO at some of the bigger ones for sure on River Road.
I'll happily come with you and talk about LOMO if you have a time at which.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see if I hear back from anybody, but
Okay,
the letter has been made. So now I just
Okay.
have to send it and
sure.
get, the sign off. So.
Quiet Niskayuna?
I don't really have anything to report on Quiet Niskayuna because I've been working on the EV fair so much.
It's
Um,
okay. I mean, I think
That's
Vicky
fine.
and I already said this, but we got the $10,000 grant and we got the highway department to agree to use electric lawn maintenance equipment. And actually, the town board meeting was delayed from the end of June because of the water main break. So last night, they passed the resolution authorizing the $10,000 for electric vehicle equipment
Oh,
to the
excellent.
highway.
Yay.
Yeah. Yeah. So
That's-
that's moving along. I mean, it's kind of fun for them because it's literally them picking out a bunch of equipment. I think I told you guys they like Milwaukee. They've picked the battery. They've actually used a little bit of it. So I think we're going to chip away at them to the point where they're going to be happy with it. I think once you start using it, you love it. You just got to take that leap. So that was good. It's going really well.
That's great. So happy to hear that, Laura.
Okay,
So everybody come to the EV fair,
Mhm.
July 20th, 9 to noon at the town hall. We'll
You
get
need-
more points if we get people
gotta
to
make
buy
sure.
EVs, but there'll be plug-in hybrids there too for people to look at.
And that's to get another $5,000 from NYSERDA too. So the more you can spread the word, the better. We've launched the campaign. Vicky, the flyers on the
Okay.
door actually if you're coming in, and we're just gonna try and really get that word out, and then probably do some more information on our website.
is it worth putting it in our Niskayuna?
Well, we could ask them.
Yeah? Does somebody have a contact with?
Yeah, I mean, he usually just does an online article for me, but that's okay. Ted
Mhm.
Dean? Yeah.
So do we get $5,000 for doing the education piece?
No, we get $5,000 if after we launch our campaign, 10 people in the town of Niskayuna buy
Okay.
a full EV vehicle.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
what I-
open
okay.
indefinitely until the grant is over. So even if it takes like a year for 10 people in Niskayuna to buy it,
Can one person buy 10 cars?
they could.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow.
I don't know any persons that can do that.
That would be.
Sounds like
Just
our
want to be
police.
clear on that.
Yeah.
There's somebody out there listening.
We need 10 for one vehicle or 1 for 10, right? We could run like a fun run.
Maybe we could buy a police car. That would be great.
That would be cool.
They won't be, once they drive one, they'll never go back.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to, did you want to add any more about the composting initiative, Ellen? No, okay. Wildlife corridors,
So Georgia actually emailed me.
okay.
He wanted to present. You know how she does the monitoring of the wildlife in Niskayuna?
Mhm.
She's been getting a lot of foxes on her screen, and she's actually had a fair number of residents discussing foxes with her. But I guess it's almost a divisive issue in our community because people are worrying about their pet being eaten by the foxes.
Well, I can say that we have at least a pair of foxes in our neighborhood, and there are 4 kits with them.
Yeah. And I don't know if foxes do the same, that thing that you study in school, the lynx and the hair up and down. I mean, maybe the fox population is just really up right now because we had a lot of bunnies and it'll go down again, but tons of foxes on the wildlife corridor places that she's been monitoring right now. That's her update.
I don't think that's a bad thing because they eat rodents as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we have foxes in my neighborhood as well. But I do I actually talked to someone outside of Georgia who was worried about the foxes eating their dogs. Little dogs.
I've never seen a fox in Niskayuna.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
Really?
I've seen a coyote right out this
yeah.
loop.
The Rice Sanctuary has coyotes too.
I have a coyote that traipses through my neighborhood, right
Yeah,
behind all
oh,
the
yeah.
foxes.
Because when they were looking at the golf course, people brought in videos of the coyotes along
Mhm.
Ruffner.
Mhm.
Okay, sustainability checklist. I think what we all were going to take a particular item. I think we need to sort of
Yeah, so
group
my-
on that and see what we want to do going forward.
my suggestion on that is go back to the minutes. Everybody's assignment is written in the
Yeah.
minutes.
Well-
Nobody did it. Don't feel bad.
Well, I did do it and I attached pictures.
Oh, you
so,
did?
So I get,
Oh, Simran did.
well,
Yes.
I get gold stars, okay?
You did.
I get gold
And so does
stars.
Simran. And
I- I
Richard
did my
tried, but
homework.
he couldn't get in.
I put pictures. I put pictures.
So
I-
I mean,
I get
there,
gold
it is
stars.
attached to the Gmail thing. So how do you want them, how, do you want it to go to you? I guess we need to clarify this.
Yeah,
Like,
I think
Because
that's what we
Richard
do.
couldn't get in.
well, no,
Yeah, so-
you're in now
so-
though, Richard, right?
So when I clicked on it initially, it said I didn't have access to the Google document. And I needed to have, I had to request access from whoever made it. So I clicked it, request access, and it says access denied, and I just did it again now. I clicked request access.
Yeah, and I gave you, I said yes. Did it not go through?
Maybe it takes a while.
We tried again.
I mean, it's,
Richard, are you using more than one email address?
Okay, it's working now.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it wasn't just a couple minutes ago, but I can get in now.
Okay. So I guess just from your point of view, Laura, what do you, I mean, this
Yeah,
was
what's the
just a
best way
very
forward?
rough, this was supposed to be just a very rough. So do you want everyone to, I think everyone has access to it. Do you want
Yeah.
everyone to continue to
Yeah.
put it in there and then,
Because I can download it at any time. I don't need to be the owner. So I'd say we can keep working with this one, and then when we're happy, Clark and I, we can download it and then bring it back, in whatever format we want it.
okay.
Okay.
All right, so one more month?
Yeah, let's,
I think when we were originally talking about these different items, we did mention heat pumps and induction stoves, but I don't think it made it onto the list.
So
I
heat
have
pumps
I
is
have
on
heat
there.
pumps.
Mhm.
Oh, it is? Okay, I'm sorry, I missed
But I
that.
don't believe that induction stoves is on there, so,
Ooh,
We can-
please remind me why induction stoves would be on this, because isn't
Well,
the
like
purpose of
apartment,
yeah.
apartment
got it.
complexes, things like that, you
Yeah,
know.
perfect.
Would
Yeah,
it be
thanks, Vicky.
non-gas stoves?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can put that in.
Because induction stoves are expensive.
Yeah, they are, but they're cheaper models. They're not as cheap as gas, though, it's true.
I'm not talking about gas, I'm just talking about
Just regular electrical
radiant
element
or element.
and
yeah.
elemental.
Okay.
Well, we're not requiring it, we're just asking the
Yeah,
question.
no.
We-
Yeah,
Yep.
so, and I thought originally, so Clark also had mentioned that if you can come up, if you can add into there like a wow factor. I think the example was, correct me if I'm wrong. For the Quiet Niskayuna, or the that part was the was the amount of emission from just from the from your blowers is the same, so some
A
fact
statistic.
statistic that will draw their attention and make them think.
Yeah, great idea. Yep.
So
Okay, does anybody have anything else that they would like to discuss tonight? Okay, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I second that. I motion to adjourn.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that emotion.
Okay, does everybody want to adjourn? Or does somebody want to stay? If you want to stay, say something.
All in
Okay,
favor?
hearing no one wanting to stay, the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
You.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.